Hello there and welcome to World News Program, streaming to you live on All 24 News. I'm your host, Kirifa Zachary, and up next are the top stories. In 24 hours, over 30 Palestinians were killed in Gaza by 3 new Zionist massacres, including airstrikes in Rafah. Palestinian resistance fought back, ambushing Zionist forces in Gaza and targeting a Zionist camp from Lebanon. Egyptian officials met with Palestinian resistance groups to discuss a ceasefire agreement showing progress. Secretary Blinken called the proposal generous and hopes for quick approval. And Jordan accused Netanyahu of hindering peace efforts. That's next. Also coming up, Sorbonne students rally for Palestine, but French police shut down the solidarity protest. Meanwhile, the displaced in Rafah thank US students for their support. Also ahead, Algerian president urges for a bold and effective strategy to aid Africa's goals and enhance continental unity. He reaffirms Algeria's dedication to championing development in Africa. Stay tuned, the details are right after the break. Hello again and welcome to the details. In the last 24 hours, the Zionist occupation forces carried out 3 devastating massacres in Gaza, leaving 34 people dead and 68 wounded. Overnight, more Palestinians were killed and others injured as the Zionist warplanes bombed homes in Gaza City and the Sabra neighborhood, including women and children. The Palestinian Ministry of Health reports that since October 7th, the death toll has reached 34,488 martyrs, with 77,643 wounded. And in the latest massacre, 25 Palestinians, including 5 children and 6 women, were killed in a raid by Zionist forces in Rafah. Reports indicate that 3 houses were bombed, leaving many wounded. Here's Osama Ayadi with the report now.
The Zionist machine is committing more horrific crimes against displaced Palestinians in the south, pushing them to flee towards central and northern Gaza. Mahmoud Abu Taha holds the body of his infant relative Dave, who was killed with 10 family members in airstrikes on their home near Rafah early Monday.
We were sitting in our homes. Then the house was bombed, and we didn't know anything. Everyone was sleeping in their bed, the displaced and those who were not displaced. Most of these martyrs were displaced people here, in addition to the family of the house. There are 10 killed, members of the family, of the house, and the displaced. They have nothing to do with anything. All of them are girls and women. This is the target that they are looking for.
After fleeing Khan Yunis and losing dozens of relatives, Zuhair Abu Taha's family sought refuge in Rafah, only to join the ranks of the martyrs' convoys.
Around 12:20, these people are displaced from Khan Yunis. They came after their brothers were killed in Khan Yunis, and they sought safety here in Rafah, but there is no safety or security. The entire house was knocked down, and 10 people were killed, and the youngest is in front of you here. His age won't exceed 3 or 4 months. And then they say that Rafah is a safe zone. There is no safety or security in Rafah or anywhere else in Gaza.
Ahmed Mahmoud's situation mirrors that of his relative Zuhair, as they both faced the same tragedy. Although Ahmed miraculously survived the massacre and was rescued from the rubble, Zionist missiles reduced his family home to rubble.
In a second, I felt a strong strike. Rocks fell on my head and back. I took the rubble off me. and I heard my siblings calling for help to pull them from beneath the rubble. So I took the rubble off them, got them outside and made sure they were okay. And then I started checking who's alive and who has been killed.
Observers see the successive Zionist massacre against the displaced in Rafah as a psychological lost war waged by the entity against hundreds of thousands of Palestinians stranded in Gaza. The territory has become the scene of some of the most atrocious massacres in modern history.
Meanwhile, the Palestinian resistance successfully ambushed the Zionist force in the central Gaza Strip. Using explosive devices and missiles, they trapped the occupation force in Al-Mughraqa area. Additionally, they targeted the enemy's command headquarters in Netzarim with mortar shells. Furthermore, Hamas military wing announced they bombed the occupation leadership headquarters in northern Palestine from southern Lebanon. And as the heat rises in Gaza, so does the crisis for the displaced Palestinians. The Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor warns that rising temperatures worsen their suffering, increasing the risk of diseases and deaths. Zahra Farjani reports.
In southern Gaza's refugee camps, particularly in Rafah, unbearable heat is compounding the suffering of displaced Palestinians. With temperatures soaring above 38 degrees Celsius, life inside the plastic tents becomes a living hell, especially for the children.
احنا عايشين هنا في الخيام الدنيا شوب حر.
We live here in tents and it's hot, and the children suffer from the mosquito bites. Because of the heat, we are forced to stay outside the tents. We are exhausted. Look at the baby's face. It is full of mosquito bites.
وشوف هاي وجه الولد كيف مليان بعوض.
Displaced people endure precarious living conditions, with insect proliferation heightening concerns, especially with summer nearing.
داخل علينا الصيف والصيف هذا يعني حم وشوب كتير.
Summer is approaching, and the heat will be extreme, which will cause several problems. It is the presence of insects, especially flies and mosquitoes, as well as other insects that we encounter for the first time. This is due to pollution and waste all over the place.
وبسبب القمام الملقاة في جميع الأماكن.
In makeshift refugee camps in Rafah, Gaza, 1.3 million residents endure dire conditions with no amenities, clean water, nor privacy. Infectious diseases surge as collapsed sewage systems amplify environmental risks.
There are 10 of us living in the same tent, and we suffer from the heat and from the mosquitoes. We do everything inside the tent, cooking, cleaning, bathing the children. In addition, I have sick children who can't stand the heat, and we are cramped in the tent. We rarely go out.
As the heat wave persists, garbage piles up and hygiene conditions deteriorate, worsening the suffering of the displaced. Experts stress the urgent need for humanitarian aid to alleviate the suffering of these vulnerable communities.
An Egyptian security delegation and Hamas discussed a ceasefire agreement in Gaza on Monday. Hamas is expected to respond to a proposal including the release of Zionist prisoners. On Tuesday, a tripartite meeting in Cairo with Egypt, Qatar, and Hamas is scheduled. Meanwhile, Egyptian Prime Minister Abdulli mentioned progress in ceasefire talks at the World Economic Forum, but noted that both parties need to make concessions on key issues.
Hamas, the overall objective for all of us, that any kind of negotiation end up with the two-state solution. This crisis will continue, and it will never stop, and it will harm everybody in this region. So we have to work very hard together, I think, the whole world, to really try to stop first this kind of unhuman, of course, attacks on Gaza, but we have to work for the more, long-term objective of having the two-state solution.
And in a similar note, this time Egypt's foreign minister expressed optimism about a Gaza ceasefire proposal during a panel at the World Economic Forum. He awaits responses from the Palestinian resistance and the entity.
We have a terrific.
So we are hopeful. The proposal has taken into account the positions of both sides, has tried to extract moderation from both sides, and we are waiting to have a final decision. There are factors that will have impact on both sides this decision, but I hope that all will rise to the occasion and recognize that we cannot have the situation of continuing loss of life. The humanitarian situation is absolutely horrific, and it can only get worse if this continues as we have seen over the last more than 6 months.
Meanwhile, Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman al-Safadi stated on Monday that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of the Zionist entity, is hindering peace efforts and pushing the entire region towards war. He also warned of the worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza, according to statements from the Jordanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. For his part, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken hailed what he termed the General's Truce proposal to the Palestinian resistance during the World Economic Forum in Riyadh, expressing hope for swift agreement.
And for the way Hamas has before it a proposal that is extraordinarily generous on the part of Israel. And in this moment, the only thing standing between the people of Gaza and a ceasefire is Hamas. They have to decide, and they have to decide quickly. So we're looking to that, and I'm hopeful that they will make the right decision.
In the same context, the U.S. Secretary of State reiterated opposition to a potential Zionist invasion of Rafah, denying any prior knowledge of the occupation's plan.
We've said clearly and for some time now on Rafah that in the absence of a plan to ensure that civilians will not be harmed, we can't support a major military operation in Rafah. And we have not yet seen a plan that gives us confidence that civilians can be effectively protected.
And in other development on Monday, Sorbonne University in Paris saw large-scale student protest condemning ongoing Zionist atrocities against Palestinians, particularly in Gaza. Thousands marched in solidarity, part of a global wave of student activism, notably in Western nations. However, French police cracked down on Sorbonne students following recent arrests at the University of Political Sciences. Displaced Palestinians in Rafah, Gaza, thanked American students for standing with them against Zionist occupation crimes. They feel hopeful for the future and are determined to continue their education despite the aggression.
We came to deliver a message to everyone, especially the American students who stood with students from the Gaza Strip. They showed their solidarity, even if it was just a small gesture. It means a lot. Today, I want to tell the world that for 7 months, we have learned nothing. We have not set a foot in university or school, and we have lost our education. We have lost everything. Education is our only hope in the Gaza Strip. It is the most important and significant thing we have lost. Today we stand in solidarity with the American students who supported us and gave us hope for the future and the right to education. I started to hope that this aggression against us would end, that we could resume our lives and continue our studies. This gave me even more hope and ambition. I am ready to finish my studies and have a future.
Moving on in our news, Tunisian students protested in solidarity with Palestine against Zionist aggression and Gaza massacres. Demonstrations across Tunisian universities led to a nationwide strike declared by the Tunisian General Union of Students. In Mauritania as well, hundreds of students at the University of Nouakchott joined a demonstration supporting Palestine and condemning the Zionist crimes. Moving on to other news now, Portuguese Ambassador Luis de Albuquerque Veloso reiterated his country's commitment to boosting economic relations with Algeria during a meeting with Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune. He highlighted the two countries' strong desire to deepen ties to match their excellent political relationship.
I have just been received by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, and I have expressed to him my happiness for serving here for more than 4 years. This is the life of diplomats. We have to leave after certain periods. We have talked about the excellent results of the successful visit of the President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, to Portugal, and we also discussed the big will to deepen and develop our economic relations to be at the level of our excellent political relations.
Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune, represented by Prime Minister Nadir Al-Arbawi, called for a robust approach to resource mobilization at the IDA Africa Heads of State Summit in Nairobi, stressing support for initiatives to address financing gaps and debt burdens in Africa.
وأسمع لي أن أقدم له وتطلع الجزائر إلى انتهاج مقاربة طموحة ونوعية.
Algeria aspires to adopt a promised and an exemplary approach in the process of resource replenishment to contribute to the increase in aid resources. Taking into account the needs of countries facing disruptions, Algeria reaffirms its support for all initiatives and mechanisms aimed at bringing the financing gap, increasing the volume of development assistance, and implementing effective instruments to reduce the impact of debt, in addition to allocating necessary resources to priority sectors.
And on the same occasion, the Algerian president called for accelerating the pace of continental integration and the implementation of the African Union's 2063 agenda, recalling the integration vision for a number of projects that Algeria has already initiated.
إن دعم التنمية في إفريقيا مرتبط بتسريع وتيرة الاندماج.
Support for development in Africa is linked to accelerating the pace of continental integration and implementing the African Union Agenda 2063. This is what Algeria strives to achieve, particularly through a vision of integrating its national projects and implementing other development projects in various neighboring African countries.
وإنجاز مشاريع تنموية أخرى بعدة دول إفريقية مجاورة.
To other African development, on Monday, the UN Security Council convened an emergency session to address Sudan's complaint against what Khartoum labeled as UAE aggression. Responding to Sudan's request, the Security Council discussed accusations against Abu Dhabi. Before the session, U.S. Delegate Linda Thomas-Greenfield urged the UAE to stop supporting both sides in Sudan's conflict, stressing the importance of halting weapon supplies that contribute to the country's destruction.
That is particularly important because we do know that both sides are receiving support, both with weapons and other support, to fuel their efforts to continue to destroy Sudan. And yes, we have engaged with parties on that, including with our colleagues from the UAE.
And in another development on Monday, Russia declared its forces' capture of a village southwest of Donetsk in eastern Ukraine, marking a fresh advance against Ukrainian forces. However, the Ukrainian General Staff reported that Ukrainian forces are still resisting Russian attempts to advance near the village. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Zelensky urged Western allies on Monday to speed up arms supplies to Kiev to counter a potential new Russian attack. Speaking alongside NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, Zelensky emphasized Moscow's attempt to exploit delays in Western aid delivery to gain more ground militarily.
The rapidity of supply literally means stabilizing the front line. Artillery, 155 caliber, long-range weapons and air defense. primarily Patriot systems. This is what our partners have, and what should now work on here in Ukraine to thwart Russia's ambitions. The Russian army is preparing for new offensive actions, and together, we must thwart the Russian offensive. Our partners have all the necessary means for this purpose.
Similarly, NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg highlighted Kiev's urgent need for more assistance to win the war.
Ukraine has been outgunned for months, forced to ration its ammunition. This means that few Russian missiles and drones have been shot down, and Russia has been able to push forward along the front line. But it's not too late for Ukraine to prevail. More support is on the way.
Time to catch up on more news stories with Salman Asib now.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez withdrew his resignation from his position, despite the opening of a judicial investigation against his wife on charges of corruption and abuse of influence, based on leaks reported by Spanish media reports. In Scotland, Hamza Youssef announced his resignation from the presidency of the government a few days before the vote on two motions of no confidence in his government. The 39-year-old politician confirmed that he will also step down from the leadership of the Scottish National Party to remain in his position until a successor is found. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock called for the rapid accession of candidate countries in the Western Balkans on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the enlargement of the European Union to include 10 additional countries. At least 42 people were killed when a dam collapsed in a town north the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, after weeks of heavy rains and devastating floods that caused homes and vehicles to wash away. Meanwhile, rescue teams were working to recover their bodies from the area, coinciding with the announcement of the suspension of classes in all educational facilities in the country's capital. The Senegalese government announced the abandonment of French as an official language, replacing it with Arabic and adopting it as an official language of the Republic. The Senegalese government approved this measure after a cabinet meeting held on Sunday in an unprecedented step in light of the political transformations that the country is witnessing.
And finally in our news, at the Annaba Mediterranean Film Festival, Palestinian directors and actors joined the Long Live Palestine program, demonstrating solidarity with the Palestinian cause. Here's Sofian Kanturi now.
At the Annaba Mediterranean Film Festival, the Palestinian cause took center stage. Participating artists stressed the significance of using cinema as a powerful tool for artistic and cultural resistance against the occupation. They view cinema as a means to expose and document the crimes committed by the Zionist entity against the Palestinian people.
We do not see any films about the resistance today because there is no Arab or international support. And they do not want us to perpetrate the image of the weak Palestinian who suffers for his country and who will never gain independence without war and without sacrifices. Independence is taken by force and not given.
The fourth edition of Annaba Festival, initially set for November of last year, but postponed in solidarity with the Palestinian people amid Zionist aggression on Gaza, feature dedicated events for the Palestinian cause. These aim to debunk the falsehoods of the Zionist narratives ingrained in minds for decades due to the dominance of the entity and its Western allies over media tools.
Sarura is the second movie we filmed in Palestine. The first one is Tomorrow's Land in 2010. Sarura is the second in 2020. We came back to document the protagonists of the fight, of the nonviolent fights in the village of Atuani, which is in the South Hebron Hills, close to the Negev desert. So in the both film, we told about the story of the nonviolent struggle of the village, but in the second film, the little child became adult.
Algeria remains dedicated to supporting the Palestinian cause across all platforms and events, including the Annaba Festival. This commitment serves as yet another demonstration of Algeria's unwavering support for Palestine, politically, diplomatically, and culturally.
شكرا لكم جد كيف بتربوا أبنائكم على حب فلسطين.
Well, that's the end of our program. Thank you for tuning in to our channel. Until next time, have a good one.